Okay, guys, welcome to another episode of Rotten Reviews. On this episode, I'm going to take a look at the 2000 movie Mission to Mars. It has a 25% on the tomato meter and a 30% on the audience score. This is one of two Mars mission movies that came out in the year 2000. They're both rotten. It's arguable over which one's more rotten. Sometimes I think this one is, sometimes I think the other one is. Maybe if I watched them both, I'd change my mind yet again. Right at the moment, I think this one's a little bit more rotten than the other one. The other one is called Red Planet. It's rotten because it's laughable in its science and it has like laughable, unbelievable characters as NASA astronauts. This one's rotten in a different way. It's rotten, I think, more offensively as a story or as a movie because it presents the audience with a premise right up front that they're going to get some kind of alien human origin story mystery that's going to be solved at the end of this. It promises a little bit of a horror movie, a lot of sci-fi, a lot of suspense, and again we're going to unravel some mystery about the origin of mankind. So this movie's promising a lot more and expecting to be taken more seriously than Red Planet was. So that's why I kind of feel this one is more offensive to the audience and deserves to be more rotten and should be remembered as being worse because it had promised things so much more lofty that it failed to deliver on. And so this one having a 30% audience score, I feel is fair, but I could see it dropping to 20% in time. I'm surprised that critics gave it 25% because although it had some big stars, it had one in particular, Jerry O'Connell, who was known for, at the time, he was the lead star on the television show Sliders. And so this was really his only big movie after Sliders that anybody remembers, at least. Sliders, everybody liked it, I liked it, but that's an aside. In this, he's kind of wasted and he's there for the name recognition, and well, this movie failed, so it didn't do his career any favors. He didn't really amount to anything as far as a big Hollywood star. Now, this movie is notable for the way it promises like almost a horror movie at the beginning. A supernatural type thing happens on Mars to a mission a mission of astronauts. They are like destroyed by some supernatural force on Mars. It's got a horror music vibe to it. It's got like a horror movie look to it and a mystery part to it of what did this to them. Now, the movie is about a second crew of astronauts that comes along to rescue or find out what happened to the originals. And, it promises so much, and I was looking forward to this from what I saw of the theatrical trailer. I saw this on home video release on VHS. I didn't see it in the theater, and I'm glad I didn't because I would have been angry that I spent my money and didn't get what I wanted. Because at the end of this, it devolves into a mess. You're left not knowing what to come away with. It gives you aliens, but it does it in a weird way. It gives you your answer to human origin story, and it's a very strange way it does that, very unsatisfying. And it actually has the protagonist rocketing off into the galaxy somewhere to be with the aliens. And it's just done in a way that it transforms the film to a totally different type of fantasy film. And the whole last third of the movie is basically just put together to show off the state of CGI at the time. And it was pretty good at the time in its day. In the year 2000, this was very good CGI, particularly in the final scene of the movie. But again, it's like a CGI showcase that was just put there, and it was very unsatisfying. So let's look at the audience reviews. It's still relevant today because we have one right off the top from October 24th, 2019. 4 stars. I do not know why, but this movie is among a select few which I can watch anytime. Been doing it every half year or so. Well, you're definitely in the minority because this movie has largely been forgotten. So, yes, maybe you have it on DVD, or God forbid you have it on VHS and your copy's getting more and more faded over time. But either way, you're really in the minority, and I would put the number of stars at 2, and I mean it's peaking out at 2. Doesn't come anywhere close to being a 3-star movie because it promises so much and it just kind of turns into a convoluted mess. We have another 4-star review. Great entertaining movie. Does Art Clark justice? Well, let's go back and look at the actual cast here. You have Gary Sinise, Tim Robbins, Don Cheadle, Connie Nielsen, Jerry O'Connell, and Kim Delaney. Okay, those are the main characters. Now, mostly you have wasted actors here because, yeah, you would expect with all these people, you would have something special. This is certainly what you would want if you were casting a 3-star, 4-star movie. Yet the movie doesn't seem to do anything with them. They're mostly wasted. Gary Sinise, his big highlight of this movie is that he has too much eyeliner. No, I'm not kidding or exaggerating. It's very cringeworthy. He looks like he did it himself, and he's trying to be glamorous, and it's very off-putting. Why would this astronaut have all this eyeliner on? But let's move on. 1.5 stars. I don't even want to finish the movie. I'm going to finish it, but I really don't want to. Bad acting, and Brian De Palma should be embarrassed. Yeah, Brian De Palma's name was attached to this. It was in the marketing. Yeah, it was like this movie was largely sold on him being a part of this, and it was a big letdown. A big letdown indeed. 3.5 stars. Mission to Mars was savagely ripped apart by the critics, but it isn't a bad movie by any means. Sure, it isn't 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I feel it is unfairly criticized. Maybe the extreme direction the film takes in the second half is to blame, or maybe the fact it had 3 different writers, which is never good news. Regardless of others' opinion, you should check this out yourself. If you like science fiction movies, NASA, or Mars, you'll probably think this is an all right film. No, I disagree. Okay, if it had 3 different writers, that explains a lot because it kind of started off as a horror mystery and then it just devolves into some weird fantasy with aliens and I don't know how to explain it. There's a montage in which, life evolves on Earth with CGI, a CGI depiction of life evolving on Earth, and morphing from, microorganisms to plants to fish to dinosaurs to humans, to show you that all human life started on Mars, and then something happened to Mars, and the humans were seeded to Earth, and then the original advanced aliens that had evolved went off to some other part of the galaxy. And somehow, this is what the movie evolved or devolved into at the end. It was like, yeah, one writer started off, then a second one did the middle, and then a third one was brought in, didn't even look at what was there before and just turned it into something else. Really bad. 2.5 stars. Whether you are mildly enamored with a couple of the set pieces in the film or intrigued by the last 10 minutes leading up to the big reveal at the end, it should be self-evident that this is so-called Mission to Mars should really be called What the Heck Did I Just Watch? My grade for the film, a C-, if it's even worthy of such high esteem and praise. Yeah, I'll agree with that. I put it at 2 stars. At one point in the movie, you're presented of the mystery of the famous face on Mars. You've all seen it in the tabloids, I'm sure, on the cover of the National Enquirer. You can just Google it, The Face on Mars, and you will see it. That's what a large part of the middle of this movie revolves around. The astronauts discover this Sphinx-like face on Mars, and it's left by aliens. And there are mysterious alien supernatural forces guarding this, keeping the astronauts from getting into it. And when they do get into it, all of a sudden, its aliens appear and want to show them what's going on, and they're our friends all of a sudden. But earlier in the movie, they were killing and ripping apart astronauts in comically graphical ways. Then all of a sudden, once the astronauts get in to this face on Mars pyramid thing, the aliens are benevolent and want to help us. Really? Then why did the aliens spend the earlier parts of the movie murdering the astronauts? Very strange. It's again like one writer went one way and another 2 writers went a different way, and then they just left it like that. 2 stars. Mission to Mars was savage. Okay. 2 stars. Total stinker of a movie with very few redeeming qualities. If you liked Interstellar, Gravity, The Martian, or any other quality space movie, you'll hate this one. They totally cheaped out on it, starting with the cheesy music and continuing until the very end with the low budget CGI. Well, I'll say something about the music. Towards the beginning of the movie, when the astronauts are in their craft traveling to Mars before they have their disastrous arrival on Mars, it turns into like a Van Halen music video. Why, I don't know. It's kind of off-putting because, again, the first scene of the movie is like a horror sci-fi, and then we go to astronauts in a Van Halen music video, Dance the Night Away, and you're kind of wondering, okay, wait a minute, now the tone is completely off here. So this movie's got really bad jarring tone problems before we even get into the plot being all over the place. So you're kind of confused in the beginning half what kind of movie this is. 3 stars. Wasn't the greatest flick, but I enjoyed it. Okay. 1.5 stars were in October of 2017. At times, the camera floats with grace, while all else, from plot to performance, crashes and sinks abysmally. I guess when you're talking about the camera work inside the spacecraft, it's very elegant. It's very well done. Again, it's mostly wasted on a music video type sequence in which Van Halen music plays. 3.5 stars. Bad story, awful acting, and a costume design that's only outdone by Gary Sinise's haircut. This mission should have been scrubbed. Why is this still on TV? It isn't in 2019, so there's that, right? That's one good bit of news. 1 star. A story about a bunch of astronauts who went to Mars and found a Disney Pixar character. Yeah, they're referring to the alien that shows up at the end. He looks like a Disney Pixar alien, like cartoonish, because remember, this is the year 2000 CGI, and it's, right in that time period where you had the cartoonish CGI of the Phantom Menace, for example. It's like that. 3.5 stars. This certainly is not as good as The Martian, but it's not a bad film at all. It does get very cheesy at times, but the action scenes and the CGI are very good. There are some very good moments in this film, and at times it is visually stunning. The story lets it down at times, but wow, they're just being so kind to this. They're in the minority. And addressing that reviewer, you are in the minority. Just know that you are in that minority. 4 stars. I'm not quite sure what everyone is complaining about. This is a solid film with an interesting story and a great ending. Deserves at least 1 star more than Red Planet. Again, I'm kind of conflicted on which one. On some years, I'm thinking Red Planet is worse. On other years, maybe on those odd years, I ponder this and consider Mission to Mars to be the worst. It's a matter of personal taste, which part of each one offends you the most, but they're both bad. 4 stars. It's 2017 and this movie is now 17 years old. I just watched it for the first time and I think it was good. I enjoyed the cast, which was your typical late 90s, early 2000s action and sci-fi cast. I was mostly intrigued and not at all let down by the story of Mars as a planet and how it evolved into the cold and desolate planet that it is today. It's a solid movie. Give it a watch. It sounds like you're describing a Disney Pixar film that could be like a family comedy action. It's not. This was meant to be taken seriously, but it does have Pixar-type animation in it at the end. I'm sorry, but I just can't take that review seriously. 1.5 stars. Stiff acting, bland dialogue, dated score, ludicrous story. Yeah, and those are the least of its problems. 4 stars. I think it's the film's score and only in places that put so many people off. Much of the music seems to harken back to some kind of 1960s Sound of Music theme park. The film is visually beautiful, with a lot of good science in the dilemmas, and a really interesting take on our nearest neighbor. I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as people on here suggest, but then I didn't want us to leave Europe, and I can't stand the Kardashians, so what do I know? Well, you don't know a lot about science anyway, because Mars is not Earth's nearest neighbor. That would be Venus. In fact, Venus is a lot more like Earth in a lot of ways than Mars is. So let's just leave that there. If you're a teenager This is all also very believable to you if you're 12 or 13. 1 star. 21st Century Cinema left Brian De Palma behind. Yeah. 4 stars. I always wonder what it's like on Mars. This movie was interesting. Well, did you ever wonder if the face on Mars was real? This didn't really give you a satisfying resolution to that, but it did give you the face on Mars. 5 stars. It was so good I cried at the end. Okay. 2.5 stars. So I know I saw this before, but can't recall where or when. Somewhat maudlin, and the 80s inspired soundtrack was distracting. Yeah, the Van Halen Dance the Night Away was a little bit distracting, and it didn't fit the tone that was presented before and what came next. Um, 2.5 stars. It's kind of bland, a mix between The Abyss and Apollo 13. It even has Gary Sinise in it. It's just an odd, muddled mess of poor storytelling, mediocre visuals, and an underutilized cast of talented actors. It's not terrible, but it's not exactly great either. I kind of agree. Apollo 13, yeah, it had Gary Sinise, but he wasn't wearing all the eyeliner. I'm not sure what was up with that. But don't bring The Abyss into this. Believe me, it's not worth bringing The Abyss into this. 2 stars. I honestly think the movie has a good start, but then it sort of goes downhill. I like the concept of it all, but somehow something else is still missing. You know, it didn't really have that great of a good start because let's just say that in the start of the movie, or very near the start, a disaster in the form of a micrometeorite strikes the spacecraft that the crew is living in. And at one point, the older mission commander of the group sacrifices himself by unsealing his helmet to space while he's got a smile on his face, and he bids his wife farewell. And then it cuts to a shot of his face looking like a frozen sausage floating in space. It's not exactly great cinema. It's kind of weird. And he does this with a smile on his face while he kind of gives a nod to his beloved wife. And I don't know who would have had tears at this, but if you shed a tear at this and shed a tear at the ending, like the previous reviewer said, then I can guess that maybe you're not an American audience member. You're living in a country in which this film is considered like top of the line. Well, here it's like something that would be found in the bottom of the bargain bin at Target. Just letting you know. 3 stars. Manned mission to Mars uncovers unexpected encounter with alien life. Sluggish first half gives way to a more interesting second half once the rescue mission reaches Mars. Sadly, the alien looks like a cartoon. Amazing to consider how much more real the FX looked 25 years before in Close Encounters. Yeah, that's a good point. Spielberg's gray aliens in Close Encounters look more real than the same type of alien that's portrayed 25 years later. Yeah, when you put it that way, it really tells you how bad this movie is. So yeah, read that again if you didn't get it the first time. But Spielberg did a better job with his CGI aliens, if they were CGI. If they were puppets, I don't know what they were, but Spielberg did a better job in 1977 with aliens than this did with a lot better technology. So again, that's like a good comparison with the Phantom Menace too. George Lucas had so much of an advantage with technology when he produced his 3 prequel movies, and yet he screwed it up so bad. So anyway, let's move on before I get sidetracked into that whole argument again. 3 stars, a pretty crazy film. I guess the whole point was to explore Mars for inhabitation, but that fails for some reason. And then there is some kind of marker being protected by invisible or hidden entities. After later exploration, the marker is much more than what people thought it was. The travels and tribulations through space are skipped for the most part, and the last half hour of the film are spent focusing on the marker. A fairly difficult plot to follow with a lot of personal struggles. Yeah, the marker, by meaning of that, they mean the face on Mars type structure. Yeah, it's hard to follow the plot because it starts off, like again, I'll say it again, it starts off like a horror sci-fi mystery. Then it goes into a kind of lighthearted rescue film. Then it goes into a darker type of survival rescue thing. Then it goes into a kind of mystery sci-fi fantasy thing. Then it ends with a total alien fantasy and a look at human origin story type of thing. And you don't know where it's going, and you're left at the end of it just wondering, was there something I was supposed to get from this? Because I don't get what the filmmaker was trying to say. You understand what happened, but you don't understand why or why you should care. 1.5 stars, only marginally better than the other movie about going to Mars, Red Planet. Seriously, this movie was clearly just a film with the agenda to push the lie of evolution, human transcendence, and panspermia. Rubbish. Newsflash, people. Life on Earth being seeded by aliens doesn't rebuke the debate about God, but merely pushes back the question as to where life came from. Richard Dawkins learned that the hard way while being interviewed by Ben Stein. Not only that, but all of it looked so polished. Wow, so we have a creationist that's arguing from his point of view why this movie is so bad. I wasn't expecting that, but let's dig that up a little here. Life on Earth being seeded by aliens doesn't rebuke the debate about God. No, but the movie wasn't trying to do that. In fact, I just finished saying that the movie doesn't try to give you any kind of message. So it's interesting that somebody thought it was like some kind of dig against creationism. Very interesting, but not what was intended, I'm sure, because I don't think the director even knew where he was going by the end of this. So anyway, 3.5 stars. I thought the concept was great, but lacked in delivery. 0.5 star. Everything about this movie was awful. The soundtrack, for example, just didn't seem like it fit this movie. The dialogue seemed like they just made it up as they went along. The visuals were actually quite good, so I guess there was one thing that wasn't awful. The interaction between the Martian and the humans in the end was so utterly cheesy that it actually laughed out loud. I don't think that's the reaction that De Palma was shooting for. I really wanted to like this movie. Yeah, the cartoonish alien at the end was laugh out loud ridiculous, but I didn't laugh at the time because in 2000 it was like, surrounded by other CGI that was very good for the year 2000. So again, it just looks dated today, but it wasn't that laughable back then. 2.5 stars. While it features great visuals, Mission to Mars is a badly crafted sci-fi picture with a cheap script and bad acting. I'll largely agree. 1.5 stars. Horrible movie. The plot starts off intriguing but quickly becomes a horribly paced, incredibly slow, overly cheesy, and horribly written sci-fi pick. After an initially good idea, it quickly resolves into horrible ideas that are so far out of the park that even though they're simple, they're incredibly stupid. The performances are terrible as well, all of the actors overdoing it to make up for the bad script. Yeah, there is that. Jerry O'Connell was really off-putting to people in this. When you watch him try to do, a desperate sequence, a scene in which he's like on a countdown plot device, so to speak, of not being able to escape from the surface of Mars, and he's watching a counter, and it's supposed to be very suspenseful. He doesn't do a very good job. He was better in that show Sliders, and this really didn't do much to help his career. So there's that. 0.5 star. Mission to Mars must be the most boring science fiction film on Earth. No, there's much boring ones. 3.5 stars. Another sci-fi space adventure mission expedition that takes us to Mars this time. On the ride, it can be pointed out that it's visually stunning on some levels, especially in the way of storytelling and the depiction of the subjected planet, with small blank thrills and few flawed, ridiculous bumps and dark turns in the direction. Yeah, that's a lot of words to say it was mediocre, but I disagree. It wasn't mediocre. It was like rotten. It was 2 stars. 0.5 star. A visually decent snooze fest that has some mediocre performances and direction, and a story and ending that were never explained and they never made sense. 2 stars. A fairly dull And unoriginal sci-fi drama. Central plot was interesting. NASA sends man to mission to Mars. It runs into trouble. Help is sent. Doesn't feel that original. I kept thinking of 2001: A Space Odyssey, even though the plots aren't that similar on the surface. However, there was still a fair bit of potential for something entertaining and or novel. Entertainment is light and novelty is minimal. It just feels like a paint-by-number space adventure. Nothing new, nothing really exciting. Well, you're being very kind to it. It's a little bit worse than a paint-by-numbers sci-fi movie. It tried, though. 1 star. What an absolute mess this movie was. Sinise looked more alien than the aliens themselves. Yeah, with all that mascara. Robin's over-the-top acting was unlike his previous underacting, and the only redeeming part of the movie, Don Cheadle's acting chops. The movie was about a huge cast trying to save Don. However, it was Don who tried to save this cast of poor acting. Unsuccessfully, I might add. Yeah, I'll agree, Don Cheadle's performance was probably the best out of all the other cast members. And I'll also agree, Tim Robbins, he's really bad and cringe-worthy in a lot of these films. He was also bad in the Tom Cruise War of the Worlds movie. In this, his performance is really bad. I don't know who told him to smile while he killed himself. It just comes across as cartoonish and comedic, and it's not funny. Tim Robbins, man, sometimes he's so bad. 4 stars. Far from flawless, but still holds its own. Not in the United States, it doesn't. And not in 2015, which is where these reviews are now. 1 star. Ready for a good sci-fi movie? Relax, because this ain't it. 3.5 stars. This film was not met with a warm reception when it was released in 2000, but I think it has some strengths and I could appreciate the film. The story centers around a rescue mission to pick up a lone astronaut stranded on Mars. Filled with some great scenes, there are some uneven, unbalanced ones. Some and the theories and scenes in this film are a little far-fetched, but overall it is very entertaining. Wow, they're so kind. You can tell it's not a 12-year-old, but they have a 12-year-old's appreciation for this film. It's very strange when I see that. On one hand, I know a 12-year-old doesn't write like this, but on the other hand, I know that only a 12-year-old mind would appreciate it in this exact fashion. Just something to think about. 5 stars. I really loved this movie. It would love for this to be what we find when we get to Mars. So you would love to find the face on Mars and for there to be a CGI alien in there. But first he's got to try to kill us from getting in there, and then he's going to explain to us, you know, our evolutionary history and everything. No, this is the last thing you want to find on Mars. I'd rather have Ray Bradbury's Martian Chronicles. That would be better for us than this. It was more entertaining too. So I'm going to call this one Mission to Mars. Quite rotten. Deserves those exact scores pretty much. There isn't a lot more I can add other than I don't anticipate this movie popping back up and becoming a cult favorite. It's got too much competition, good and bad. It's just another bad Mars movie. Maybe somebody could do a fan edit and make this into a comedy. There's a chance that could happen. It's possible. It's got the potential for that. This could be like a fan re-edit and then it could be hysterical. But you'd be running up against some pretty stiff copyright laws to do that. So I'm going to leave it for now and see you on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.